had foundation repairs performed here, we still need to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent the water from accumulating up against the house in the first place. So we're over here at a home that had been disclosed to have had some foundation damage in the past, and what I wanted to do to explain a couple of items outside that I can see almost at first glance that show me that there is some water that's accumulating up against the foundation walls down here around the outside of the home. Water accumulation is what is going to allow this dirt to get super saturated, become very wet, and then become even heavier as it pushes, as gravity pulls the dirt down, and not just down but also inward into the basement space. So when we come over here, over on the left side of the home, you can see holes right here, right? So we've got a good amount of soil where it's missing. There's a pretty large gap here between the chimney and the foundation wall, and then you can just see how water can easily come down during super heavy rains, sit up against the side wall here of the house, but that water is washing down these holes, these large cavities around the chimney, and we've got a lot of vegetation which needs to be removed from the house. That's a different conversation. Back here though, I do want to point out that we've got the same condition going on here. Pretty large hole going down into the cavity, the recess right up against the foundation wall. These areas, these cavities that are allowing water to sit up against the foundation wall are generally going to be some of the larger leak points. This is the left facing foundation wall here where we were talking about the gaps where the water can fall down in between the chimney and the foundation wall and start to push inward on the foundation wall. If you look here, you can see a pretty good amount of stair-step cracking. This is wall movement indicative of foundation wall being pushed on with all of that wet dirt outside, which is the hydrostatic pressure I was talking about. So these walls have moved inward somewhat, and I'll show you one area that's relatively level, but as you can see, the wall is bowed, so you start to get a little bit of a gap in between the foundation wall and the upper foot of the level. This is just showing us that the wall has moved inward and out of plumb. You can actually see that the wall stud, which has been installed against the wall, shows a little bit of gapping. Up here, it's right up against the wall, and as we come down a little bit more, we've got about a 1/4 inch or maybe even a 1/2 inch of movement here, just because of all of the long-term water accumulation that we've had up against the foundation walls. So you got some stair-step cracking. This area right here is the chimney with the large cavity where the soil was allowing the water to accumulate. Of course, in this area where those large cavities were, what do we see but a little bit of floor dirt here and water staining from long-term water leakage coming in. We also have a little bit more stair-step cracking and actual brick cracking over here on the front-facing foundation wall of the home. This is again all evidence of very long-term water accumulation that's been occurring up against the foundation walls of the home. Even though we've had some foundation repairs performed here, we need to stop the water from accumulating up against the foundation walls of the home in the first place. This is the back-facing foundation wall here. We've got one long adhesion crack as it runs all the way along. An adhesion crack is essentially when we have a lot of wet dirt outside that starts to accumulate up against the basement wall. And what will happen is that wet dirt will freeze during the winter time, and as it freezes, it'll actually adhere to your block wall. What does water do when it freezes? It expands. So it'll actually expand and lift up your block wall a little bit, creating this little crack, this long horizontal crack that we see. Once the wall, the exterior soil takes and thaws itself out, it'll set the wall back down, but it's cracked and it's basically a weak point where the wall can now move in. If you look up here, you can see a pretty good amount of wall movement where the top block is pushed out of plumb and separate. This is just all the more evidence as to why we need to make sure that we prevent water from accumulating up against the foundation walls in the first place, so that we don't have to pay several $1,000s to have foundation wall repairs performed, and also, you know, an interior waterproofing system like a sump pump. You know, this is preventing all of the water from staying and lingering in this area, but it's not actually stopping the water from accumulating up against the exterior walls in the first places, which is what we really need to do. So we got a good amount of water staining over here in the crawl space. Now this is directly opposite the patio. This is essentially coming up to the foundation wall, but since it was cracked in the middle of the patio and half of the patio was sloped backwards towards the house, you can see where the water staining kind of starts right around the top. Now when I walk into the backyard, I can see immediately the cracks running through the patio here. The area between the crack and the foundation wall of the home, you can see that it's been moving here. What we're getting is all this long-term water accumulation that is falling down in this area, and the water comes down and it just basically washes your tree berries and your debris toward the foundation wall of the home, which is why you see all of this large deposit of silt and other debris. This is evidence essentially that you have water going toward your home, following the crack and the downward slope towards the house here. You can actually see that it's sunk the patio somewhat, and some areas here the gaps are relatively large where water can just wash down between your patio cement slab and the foundation wall, and that water is essentially just going to leak its way into the house or the crawl space or whatever type of foundation that you have. In a perfect world, this patio would actually be re-poured, slope it away from the home so the water drives out towards the backyard and not up against the foundation walls of the home. This is a fairly common occurrence where the patio or a driveway or a sidewalk cement slab is cracked or otherwise sunk in and sloped towards the house, and like a slip and slide, it's just driving water up against the foundation wall of the home. And this is pretty strong evidence. All of the silt and the tree debris, the wash that's left behind from the water that's been traveling toward the foundation wall of the home, the pad would be re-leveled or re-poured so that it slopes properly away from the home. The last thing I really want to point out, on the back side here of the house, the yard is sloped toward the foundation wall. This is allowing any and all water that falls into the backyard to just travel toward the foundation wall, and there's nowhere else for it to go. So it's just going to sit up against the wall here and make the dirt wet. As this wet dirt tends to stay over a long period of time, it's going to create that hydrostatic pressure that's just going to keep pushing against the foundation walls, and eventually it'll make them move. The home had been repaired with a structural foundation repair, but what it appears so far is that we haven't done anything to actually remove the cause of the dampness. There's a little bit of cracking on the exterior wall here due to that foundation wall movement. You know, a home has had some structural foundation repairs. It hasn't been corrected of all of the causes that are contributing to the water accumulation up against the house, such as rebuild the grade around the backyard here. It is pretty significantly sloped to the home, so you consider installing an exterior French drain and tying it into your storm drains. A quick band-aid, you can reseal the patio here where it meets the foundation wall. Absolute repair would require re-leveling or re-pouring the pad so that it slopes properly away from the foundation wall of the home. So the recommended repairs for all of this would be resloping the patio rear cement slab away from the home so we can mitigate as much of this staining as possible. And then we're going to need to go ahead and reslope the yard, the grading, all the way around the back, the left and the front facing foundation walls. And then we're going to need to make sure that the gutters stay nice and clean so we don't have water accumulating up against the foundation walls of the home.